My name is Caleb Rowan, 51 years old. I'd been with Northbridge Fixtures, a premium commercial interior supplier in Seattle, for over 15 years. I wasn't just the head of sales, I was the sales department driving nearly a quarter of the company's total revenue with clients I'd cultivated over golf weekends, midnight phone calls, and years of unbroken trust. So when Dana Corwin, the new VP of Operations, slid a document across the table and said, "We're reducing your base salary by 40% and restructuring commissions for alignment," I didn't yell, I didn't plead. I just stared back at her, calm, silent, already planning. If this made your blood boil already, type justice in the comments. Dana came from a sleek Manhattan firm that specialized in corporate efficiency makeovers. New owner, new leadership, new spreadsheets, no soul. She arrived with polished slide decks and cold eyes. "We need to future-proof our workforce," she said, her lips barely moving. I opened the folder. Base cut, commissions impossible. No room for negotiation. Dana expected me to panic. Instead, I stood, shook her hand, and left the room. The look in her eyes said everything. She didn't understand what she'd just triggered. That afternoon, I packed up my office slowly. No dramatic exits, no slammed doors, just a box of memories, a photo of my son graduating culinary school, the fountain pen a client once gave me, and the plaque from when I broke the company's annual revenue record. From her glass office above, Dana watched. I nodded to Marcus, our CFO and my friend of 12 years. His eyes were clouded with guilt. This wasn't just about cost cutting. It was a surgical removal of me. When I joined Northbridge in 2008, they were a boutique operation doing $7 million annually. Last year we closed at $68 million. My direct accounts alone brought in over $15 million. I'd built those relationships from the ground up. Not with software or discounts, but with integrity. I knew birthdays. I knew building specs from memory. I knew how to keep a promise, and that meant something until Dana came with her digital dashboards and performance matrices. I didn't drive home right away. I pulled into a quiet diner across the bridge, ordered a black coffee, and opened my laptop. My inbox had already started buzzing. "Heard what happened? What's going on? Is it true she's replacing you?" These weren't just clients, these were people who trusted me. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, a storm in my chest, but a strange calm in my mind. Dana thought she'd ended my influence. What she didn't realize was my influence was never about the company. It was about me, and soon she'd feel the full weight of what she dismissed. The morning after I walked out of Northbridge, my phone buzzed just as the sun broke over Puget Sound. It was Elliot Sanders, procurement director at Rainlight Commercial Group, one of our oldest accounts. "Caleb," he said, skipping any small talk, "we got an email from a woman named Dana. She's saying she's our new point of contact. What the hell is going on?" I told him only what was necessary. I'd parted ways with the company. I could hear the tension rise in his voice. "She's already hinting at restructuring our terms. Look, if you're going somewhere else, let's talk. We trust you, not whoever this new hire is." He wasn't the only one. By lunch, I'd heard from 4 more clients, all confused, frustrated, and suddenly unsure about staying with Northbridge. Dana had underestimated the web of loyalty I'd built, thread by thread, over a decade and a half. What she called legacy overhead, my clients called reliability. I hadn't even made a single call, but the dominoes were beginning to shift, and each client call confirmed what Dana couldn't see from behind her quarterly metrics. Relationships are stronger than policy. I drove into town to meet Daniel Corver, CEO of Stratus Interiors, a competitor we'd always kept an eye on. We'd talked loosely at conferences, always with respect. Now, with my options open and his company growing fast, I saw opportunity. Over coffee, he leaned forward and said, "We've been trying to break into Northbridge's territory for years. You have the map. We have the machine. Let's build something that crushes them." I didn't commit yet, but I left that meeting knowing something critical. I wasn't starting over. I was starting fresh. 2 days later, I returned to Northbridge one last time to hand over my company laptop and keycard. The receptionist smiled awkwardly. "Dana's not in," she said quickly. I hadn't asked. As I dropped the items on the desk, Marcus, the CFO, came down from the mezzanine with an envelope in hand. Inside was a printout, client retention data, revenue by rep, and a silent nod of allegiance. "For your records," he said softly. I understood. He knew what was about to happen, and he wanted to make sure I was equipped. That night, I reviewed every account I had ever touched. Some I hadn't spoken to in months. Others still texted me family photos. I pulled up their needs, patterns, service histories. It wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about proving that you don't replace loyalty with efficiency and expect the heart of the business to keep beating. I poured a bourbon, stared at the ceiling and whispered, "She thinks she cut my salary. She just signed a transfer of trust." And I was ready to cash it in. Monday morning came with a strange stillness. No commute, no office keycard, just quiet resolve and a phone that wouldn't stop ringing. The first call was from Nina Cho, project manager at Evermark Builds, one of our longest-standing clients. "Caleb, we got a revised contract from Northbridge this morning," she said flatly. "Dana cut our discount and changed our delivery windows. Says we're no longer aligned with their evolving logistics framework." What the hell is that supposed to mean? I didn't answer directly, I just listened. And when she asked where I'd landed, I told her I hadn't yet, but I was close. That same hour, a certified envelope arrived at my doorstep. I knew before opening it that it was from Northbridge's legal team. Inside was a neatly worded cease and desist letter, accusing me of attempting to solicit proprietary client relationships and warning me of legal consequences if I violated my separation clause. At the bottom was Dana's unmistakable signature, sharp and clinical. It was laughable. Really, I hadn't made a single offer. I hadn't even mentioned work unless they brought it up. But clearly Dana was rattled. She saw the cracks forming and now she was scrambling to stop a flood that had already begun. I forwarded the letter to my attorney Ria, a razor-sharp contract lawyer I'd known for years. Within the hour she called and said, "They're bluffing. Your clause prohibits you from selling similar products, not from talking to people you've known for 15 years. I nodded quietly as she walked me through every detail. "And by the way," she added, "if they keep pushing, we push back with their own metrics. You have years of proof that you were the company. Let's not forget that." I hung up, more focused than angry. I didn't need vengeance, I needed precision. Later that evening, Daniel Corver from Stratus Interiors emailed me an offer. Senior Vice President of Strategic Growth, full autonomy, flexible non-compete workaround, build your own division. It was bold and personal. Daniel wasn't just hiring me, he was betting that I could take Northbridge's clients with nothing more than trust and time. And he was right. I hit accept with a calm heart and a clear mission, not to destroy what Dana built, but to reclaim what she never understood. That same night, Marcus messaged me. Just 3 words. "They're losing Evermark." The very client who'd called me that morning. A week ago, I was being told I was outdated. Today, Dana was watching the foundation crack beneath her. That's the thing about trust. It doesn't crumble, it walks away. And it always knows where it's going next. Friday morning, the cracks Dana tried to plaster over began to widen. I received a discreet text from Leo Ferris, one of Northbridge's longest-serving regional account managers. "Can we talk off the record?" We met that evening at a dive bar far from the corporate skyline, both of us nursing whiskeys like old war buddies. Leo didn't waste time. "They're panicking. Dana's holding emergency strategy meetings, redrafting talking points, micromanaging client calls. It's a mess. Half the team is terrified. The other half's quietly updating LinkedIn." He leaned in, voice low. "She's blaming you. Says your exit disrupted the ecosystem. But you didn't disrupt anything, Caleb. You were the ecosystem." Leo slid an envelope across the table, mimicking what Marcus had done days before. Inside were internal memos, Northbridge's Q2 forecast revisions, Dana's plans to increase prices across legacy accounts, and a breakdown of who she believed would follow me if I joined a competitor. The numbers didn't lie. Dana had tried to surgically remove me and forgot I was the circulatory system. "You need to know," Leo whispered. "She's launching an audit, going through your expense reports looking for something to pin on you if clients keep jumping ship." I almost laughed. They were trying to retroactively justify betrayal. Meanwhile, Stratus Interiors was ready. Daniel and I worked late nights mapping an onboarding sequence for the clients who were already reaching out. Rainlight, Evermark, a few others. We didn't rush it, we made the transitions painless, almost invisible. When orders arrived on time, when emails were answered after hours, when site visits happened without chasing, clients knew what they'd always suspected. Caleb Rowan wasn't just a vendor, he was a constant. And constants don't vanish. They relocate. The following Monday I received a package, unsigned, unmarked. Inside was a Northbridge slide deck from a leadership meeting titled, "Reclaiming the Narrative, Managing Client Retention Post-Caleb." One slide was circled in red. It showed that 26% of Northbridge's revenue was now considered high risk. My former accounts, the ones Dana said could be managed by data alone. But spreadsheets don't return phone calls on weekends. Algorithms don't walk job sites. You can't plug trust into a CRM and expect it to update itself. That week, Stratus closed its first $2.3 million deal with Creston Development, one of Northbridge's oldest clients. The transition was seamless. Dana never saw it coming. And even if she had, she wouldn't have known how to stop it. You can't reverse a tide that's already washing you away. She'd wanted me gone so she could change the game. But I had built the game board. It started with a LinkedIn notification. Marissa Hale, Northbridge's senior client strategist and Dana's hand-picked protege, had updated her headline. Open to new opportunities, strategic account manager, commercial interior specialist. My eyebrows lifted. Marissa had been Dana's closest ally, the one who'd shadowed her in every meeting and pitched every so-called optimization with rehearsed certainty. If she was jumping ship, something had shifted beneath the surface. Moments later, I got a message. Would love a quick conversation, strictly confidential. I knew that tone. It was the sound of doubt beginning to override ambition. We met in a quiet co-working lounge, overlooking the city. Marissa looked sharper than ever, but wore exhaustion like a hidden bruise. I'm not here to ask for a job, she said quickly, but I need to tell you what's happening. What followed was a flood of revelation. Dana had manipulated the quarterly report to downplay losses. She'd inflated Gabrielle's numbers. My replacement by attributing legacy account revenue to her name even though those accounts were already leaving. She's presenting the board a fantasy, Marissa said flatly, and she's setting up a scapegoat. You. She slid over a flash drive. This has everything. And yes, I kept backups. Inside that drive were the real numbers. Client satisfaction surveys that had tanked since my exit, internal emails flagging account instability, and the true forecast that showed Dana had already lost over $6 million in revenue. One thread stood out, a desperate email from Dana to the new CEO titled, Strategic Disruption Fallout, EPR Guidance. She knew the storm had arrived and now she was trying to blame the thunder on me. But she wasn't the one holding lightning anymore. At Stratus, Daniel and I had already begun forming a separate division for legacy account transitions. We called it Continuity, because that's what clients were really buying. Not product, not price, but continuity. That afternoon, Westline Projects, another former client, sent over a signed contract. Another $3.1 million annual deal. Quietly, another brick fell from Dana's crumbling empire. Every time she tried to regain control with emails and slide decks, her clients responded by making calls to me. Marissa's final words stayed with me. You weren't just their sales guy. You were the one person they trusted not to change when everything else did. Trust. That word again. Dana had replaced it with KPIs and performance matrices, and now she was discovering what happens when you build your kingdom out of spreadsheets. It burns fast. The message came from an anonymous Proton Mail account. The subject line was simple. Board minutes, you'll want to see this. I hesitated for a moment, but curiosity and experience told me to open it. Inside was a transcript. Partial, but enough. It was from a closed-door Northbridge board meeting held just 3 days prior. What I read made my chest tighten and my mind sharp. Elaine Porter, a longtime board member with ties to the company's founder, had finally said out loud what others had been whispering. We cut the man who built the ladder we're now falling off of. According to the transcript, Dana had been presenting the board with heavily massaged data, claiming the transition was stabilizing and the revenue loss was predictable churn. But then Elaine dropped a bomb. She had quietly commissioned her own report, hiring a third-party analyst to track client migrations, internal morale, and projected long-term losses. The findings were brutal. Northbridge had lost 19.4% of its recurring revenue in under 3 months, and nearly 70% of it was linked directly to my former accounts. What stunned me most wasn't the numbers, it was the reaction. The transcript recorded Ray Marchand, another senior board member, asking a simple question: did Dana mislead us? Silence followed. Then someone asked about legal exposure if investors claimed negligence. That was the turning point. This wasn't just internal chaos anymore. It was liability. I realized Dana had lost more than clients. She'd lost the room. Meanwhile, back at Stratus Interiors, momentum was snowballing. Clients weren't just transitioning, they were evangelizing. One sent a newsletter to their subcontractors introducing Stratus as their exclusive vendor. crediting our unmatched commitment to continuity and care. It wasn't about price anymore. It was about principle. We weren't just collecting contracts, we were rebuilding trust, and word was spreading like wildfire. That same afternoon, I received a voicemail from Marcus, the CFO, who'd always stayed in my corner. "She's done, Caleb," he said simply. "The board is holding an emergency session next week, and they've already shortlisted replacements." His voice paused. "They're asking questions about whether you'd ever consider returning in some kind of advisory role." I didn't respond, but I felt a quiet satisfaction. I hadn't sent a single threat. I hadn't burned a bridge. I just stood tall while others dug their own grave. That night I poured a quiet drink, stared out over the city, and smiled. Dana was about to learn the final lesson. When you fire the foundation, the whole house eventually caves in. The email came at 2:14 a.m. Not to me, but to multiple clients I'd once served. Dana had sent it herself. The subject line was cold and corporate. Clarification regarding recent personnel and vendor changes. But the body of the message was anything but professional. It was a veiled attempt to poison my mind. She claimed I had violated my non-compete clause, that I'd engaged in unethical behavior by manipulating clients into switching vendors, and that Northbridge would be pursuing all available remedies. The tone was defensive, erratic, and laced with desperation. Worse, she CC'd multiple subcontractors, architects, and builders, trying to publicly shame me into silence. But Dana didn't understand two things. First, my clients weren't naive. They could spot desperation masquerading as confidence. And second, I'd been recording everything. Every voicemail, every meeting, every text where clients reached out to me. Not the other way around. Within hours, my phone lit up. Not with concerns, but with support. Frank from Rainlight called first. "She's making herself look unhinged." "Caleb, no one buys it." Nina from Evermark followed. "We received the email. We already deleted it. You're with us. Period." Later that day, my attorney Rhea called with a measured voice. "She's just opened the door we've been waiting for." The mass email was a defamation risk. Libel sent to third parties with no legal standing. It was also a clear sign that Northbridge was losing control. "We can file a cease and desist, or we can let her dig the hole deeper," Rhea said. But either way, she just handed us the narrative. I chose to do nothing for now. Dana's last move wasn't bold. It was reckless, and reckless leaders tend to fall by their own hand. The next morning, Stratus Interior's client support team forwarded me a screenshot. A post on an industry forum by a mid-level manager at Northbridge. "Morale is in free fall. Leadership turnover incoming. Clients leaving faster than we can onboard new ones." It had gone semi-viral within our circle, gathering comments from other vendors and project managers who quietly added, "We moved to Stratus last quarter," or "We were warned but didn't listen." Dana's own people had begun turning on her, not because they hated her, but because they could no longer defend her choices. At noon, I walked into our quarterly team meeting. Revenue had passed $19 million, 5 months ahead of projections. Daniel raised his glass of sparkling cider, looked at me and said, "It's not just the numbers, it's the culture you brought." I smiled, humbled. "We don't win with algorithms, we win with people." And that, I knew, was what Dana could never automate. Exactly 1 year to the day since Dana sat across from me and said my package was outdated, I found myself sitting on the advisory board of a private equity-backed interiors firm, reviewing potential hires for a newly acquired company we'd just added to our growing portfolio. We were expanding aggressively, buying out smaller suppliers with strong regional reputations but weak leadership, and helping them rebuild from the inside. That morning I glanced down at the list of applicants for the role of Director of Strategic Growth. My breath paused. There it was, Dana Corwin. For a moment I thought about passing it off to someone else. But then I remembered the face she made the day I didn't argue, didn't beg, didn't even flinch, just walked out with a quiet promise. And here she was, applying for a position not even equivalent to the one she once used to gut me. I leaned back in my chair as the interview began. She didn't recognize me on the board roster. Or maybe she did and just hoped I'd let it go. She spoke about lessons learned, about maturing leadership style, about understanding the role of people over process, all the things I once tried to teach her before she decided spreadsheets were smarter than experience. When the floor opened for questions, I waited. Then I asked, "What would you say is the greatest mistake you've made in your career?" There was a pause. Dana blinked, then answered carefully. "I underestimated the power of legacy relationships. I focused too much on restructuring and not enough on retention. It cost us." It was the closest thing to an apology she'd ever offer. But it wasn't enough. Because while she was learning that lesson, I was living proof of what trust can build when it's not treated like an outdated concept. After the meeting, I slipped out quietly. No need to gloat. No need to confront. I knew how this would end. A week later, I received a message from our CEO. We passed on Corwin. Didn't feel like the right cultural fit. I didn't reply, just smiled and got back to work. That same week, my daughter invited me to dinner at her new condo, paid for by her recent promotion to senior architect. As we sat on her balcony sipping wine and watching the sun dip behind the Seattle skyline, she asked, "Do you ever think about going back to Northbridge just to show them what they lost?" I shook my head. No need. They already know. Before I left, I walked into my home office and looked at a framed quote my father once gave me. "Character is what you do when no one's watching." Dana had never understood that. She thought power came from titles. But real power is quiet. It walks out with a box and takes the future with it.